You didn't say you were black. That sentence, cold, trembling, rang out across the bustling train station, freezing the air for a few suspended seconds. Ember James stood there, the tasteful fabric hat she had so carefully chosen for this special day, suddenly felt meaningless. 6 months of exchanged letters, 3 weeks of traveling across multiple states, a trunk full of hope, and just one look for it all to collapse. Raymond Hale, a white businessman, still holding a bouquet already wilting from nerves, took a step back. Panic flickered plainly in his eyes. You wrote so beautifully. You thought I was white. Ember finished the sentence he didn't dare say aloud. Her voice was soft, but each word sliced through the air like a blade. Around them, curious glances began to turn their way. A black woman publicly rejected by the very man who had once called her his soulmate in words. Raymond pulled out his wallet and offered her a few bills. You should go back. I'll pay for your ticket. Ember looked at him, not with sadness, but with restrained fury. Go back where? I gave up everything to come here. And at that exact moment, a deep male voice boomed, like thunder in a clear sky. That's how you handle it, Hale? Throw money and walk away? Everyone turned. A tall man stepped out from the sunlight's edge. His eyes were sharp as steel. Bennett Cross, the wealthiest landowner in the region, had just arrived and brought a thunderous silence to the entire station. The entire station fell silent. Bennett Cross walked forward, each step echoing into the shattered pride of Raymond Hale. The man didn't need to raise his voice. His very presence carried a weight that made the entire space instinctively step back. She is a person, not some item you have the right to return. Raymond opened his mouth to respond, but managed only a few incoherent sounds. This wasn't just some passerby. This was the owner of Cross Haven, a man who held nearly half of Oak Ridge in his name, whose words carried more weight than a town council resolution. Bennett turned to Ember. His voice was deep, courteous, not pitying, but respectful. I'm Bennett Cross. I own an estate 5 miles from here, if you don't have anywhere to go. Cross Haven always has a room for those the world has cast aside. Raymond's face drained of color. Bennett, you can't be serious. She is my guest. Bennett interrupted, sharp as a blade. Anyone who has a problem with that can take their business off my land. Ember looked at the two men. One was shrinking under the weight of his own shame. The other stood tall, like a pillar in the middle of a storm. She nodded. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I'll go with you. The trunk Ember pulled behind her made a soft clatter as it rolled away. No one knew that beneath her simple dress were ancient documents, papers that could shake the very foundations of Oak Ridge. Cross Haven was unlike any place Ember had ever set foot in. From the hand-forged gate draped in ivy to the terrazzo-floored hallway, shimmering under the golden afternoon light, everything here radiated the quiet authority of time and power. Oil paintings lined the staircase, and each piece of walnut furniture had been meticulously preserved through generations. But what captivated Ember the most was the library, a circular 3-story room filled with ancient books, sheepskin maps, and scrolls sealed in red wax. This was not just a repository of knowledge, it was a key to the buried past of Oak Ridge. Bennett Cross, though a millionaire, lived like a reclusive scholar. The son of a civil rights activist, he had never married, but he had never lacked conviction. During their first dinner, he told Ember, "In this land, truth is often buried with the powerless. But I believe some people are born to dig it up." Ember nodded slightly but said nothing. Each night, As the town drifted into sleep, she quietly unlocked the wooden trunk bound shut with cloth straps. Inside was a set of documents dated 1867, bearing the red seal of the state, recording land rights belonging to a black man named Elijah Freeman, her ancestor. And that very piece of land now rested in the hands of the most powerful family in Oak Ridge. News spread like wildfire. Within just 3 days, the entire town of Oak Ridge was whispering the unbelievable. A black woman, young, educated, was now living at Cross Haven. The estate that had, until now, only opened its doors to the white elite Ember James became the center of attention, even though she hadn't once stepped beyond the iron gates. The pastor's wife brought over an apple pie to visit Bennett and just happened to drop by to see the girl. The mayor's wife claimed she was donating books to the library, while Mrs. Norton, the wealthiest widow in the county, came by to borrow the exact European blend of Earl Grey tea. They didn't come to make friends. They came to look, to measure, to judge. But at every tea visit, like Ember never flinched, shoulders straight, chin lifted, her voice soft, but never wavering. She spoke in the precise English of a Boston schoolteacher, her gaze sharp yet courteous. The hand holding the gold-rimmed porcelain teacup never trembled, even though she knew every glance cast her way was an invisible cut. What unsettled those women was this. Ember didn't ask for acceptance. She didn't try to blend in. She made people adjust themselves when facing her. And so, from someone they once pitied, she quietly became someone the whole town began to fear. That afternoon, before the sunset had a chance to turn the lake behind the estate gold, Raymond Hale appeared at the gates of Cross Haven. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his face tense with something unclear. Remorse or fear. "Ember, I just wanted to see if you're all right," Raymond said, nervously twisting his baseball cap out of shape. "Honestly, the whole town is talking. I thought, maybe it'd be better if you left. You, me. We could both save face." Ember stood on the steps, back straight, just like the day they first met. But this time, her eyes held no trace of hope. "I'm better than ever, Raymond," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I've just officially accepted the position as Mr. Cross's library curator. It suits me well. That place holds many fascinating things." Raymond flinched slightly. "The library? That dusty old place?" He scoffed awkwardly, clearly never having set foot inside. Ember simply smiled, a smile that needed no explanation, because Raymond had no idea. It was within those dust-covered shelves that she had uncovered ancient land records, long-buried deeds, among them the original map of the town's eastern region. Land the Hale ancestors had once purchased for a price that was, conveniently, never written down. And now, with just one signature, the entire Hale lineage could fall from Oak Ridge's landowning throne like a rotted chess piece. That night, under the dim glow of an oil lamp in the Cross Haven library, Ember quietly opened page after page of time-worn documents. Maps, tax records, official memos, handwritten notes, all inked in faded brown, the script blurred with age. Yet those faded lines burned bright in her heart, like an old wound suddenly torn open and bleeding again. The first name that appeared, Isaiah Carrington, her great-great-grandfather, a freedman after the Civil War, granted more than 600 acres in eastern Oak Ridge by order of the state governor. It was the hard-earned result of an entire generation's struggle. And yet, just 6 years later, it all vanished from the records. The reason? Voluntarily vacated. But according to the handwritten log Ember had just recovered, wedged deep in the spine of an old law book, The truth was far more horrifying. Carrington had been beaten, his home set ablaze, and he was threatened with lynching if he didn't surrender the land to the so-called Oak Ridge Landowners Association. One name appeared over and over again in the threats: Hale. The documents from 1870 to 1872 were long believed lost. But Ember, with her inherited trunk and an unyielding mind, had found the missing pieces. The original land grant, the forced transfer order, and Isaiah's personal journal describing the final night he fled Oak Ridge. Now, Ember carried more than the blood of the Carringtons. She carried the chance to restore the honor of a family long buried beneath the dust of greed and prejudice. The Oak Ridge Town Hall was packed that day, from founding families to shopkeepers, farmers, pastors, and students. On the old wooden podium, Ember James stood upright, her hand resting on the file she had spent months restoring. "The documents I present today," she began, "have been verified by the State Historical Archives Commission and the Independent Legal Office of the State of Maryland." On the projector screen appeared a land map, an official grant of ownership to Isaiah Carrington, and next to it, a threatening letter bearing the mark of the Oak Ridge Property Association, with the name Hale printed boldly at the bottom. Raymond jumped to his feet, face flushed red. "Lies! You made this all up. No one remembers any Joseph Carrington." But down below, heads slowly began to nod. An elderly man, trembling, said, "My father once mentioned a black family being forced off their land, but told me never to ask." Another voice, "When I was a kid, I heard a story about a man who was hanged as a warning in the eastern woods." The air turned thick. Raymond opened his mouth, but no words came out. Ember stepped forward. "I didn't come to reclaim land or tear anyone down. I came to make things right, by building." She paused and looked across the room. "I propose the creation of the Carrington Community Fund, using every legal entitlement to support scholarships, housing, and justice for the next generation." There wasn't a single clap from a town just waking up from a centuries-long dream built on a false foundation. The sound of the gavel echoed through the silent hall. After thorough review, the state attorney stood up, voice clear and firm. "We confirm. All documents provided by Ember James are accurate, lawful, and carry current legal validity." A wave of murmurs swept through the room like the first breeze of the season, rippling through a field of ripened rice. Raymond Hale, the man who once stood at the pinnacle of power in Oak Ridge, was now just a shadow. He no longer shouted, no longer argued. He simply bowed his head, hands gripping the armrest tightly, eyes blank with shock. Ember still stood there, not proud, not angry, only calm and quietly resolute, like a statue. "I didn't come to seize or take," she said, her voice gentle but commanding. "I came to correct what has been twisted, not with hammers or axes, but with truth and kindness." The air felt frozen. Then a single clap, hesitant yet sincere, rose from the back of the room, one, then two, and soon the entire hall stood up. They weren't just applauding Ember. They were applauding a new chapter of Oak Ridge, one being rewritten, not with blood, but with wisdom and compassion. Bennett Cross stood beside Ember, his eyes never leaving her, no longer just the one who offered her shelter. Now, he saw her as a partner, walking beside him, rewriting the history of the town they both loved. The following spring, the town of Oak Ridge wore a new face, not with a fresh coat of paint, but with a profoundly transformed spirit. The Carrington Cross Foundation was officially launched, carrying the message, "No one left behind because of skin color or origin." The foundation began by awarding full scholarships to the first 12 black students of Oak Ridge, children who had previously been denied admission to the town's school simply because their surnames were deemed unsuitable. A once abandoned plot of land by the river was transformed into affordable housing for working-class families who couldn't qualify for bank loans. Every brick bore the foundation's imprint, not just as a shelter, but as a silent apology from a new generation. And Raymond Hale's old store? It had become the Carrington Community Library, not only housing books, but also preserving copies of the historic case files. Children here would grow up not just learning to read, but learning to understand that justice has no color. Ember James, the woman who once stood alone at the train platform, was now invited to lecture at prestigious universities from Chicago to New York. She didn't just retell the story she had lived. She analyzed the law, the strategy, and the unwavering resolve that allowed a black woman to turn an entire town around, without ever raising a flag of hatred. And Oak Ridge, once a place of denial, had become a place of new beginnings. One summer morning, a sign reading, "Under New Ownership," appeared on the old shop front of Raymond Hale. No announcement, no farewell. Only a few neighbors saw him loading luggage into an old truck, his face lowered, retreating from Oak Ridge as quietly as he had lived in it. No one came to see him off. The town didn't need a goodbye article. No one held a farewell party for the man who once ruled the main street with prejudice and coldness. Raymond disappeared the same way he once denied Ember's existence, right there on the train platform. At Cross Haven, Ember stood on the porch, looking out over the town in the radiant glow of the afternoon. Bennett came beside her and slowly said, "You could have taken everything from him, ruined his name, even sued him." Ember didn't turn toward him, only replied quietly, "Revenge is easy. It gives you satisfaction for a day, but leaves nothing behind. Change that lives on in the people who come after." Her words weren't just for Bennett, but like a message to the entire town. A few weeks later, an unmarked envelope arrived at the Carrington Cross Foundation. Inside was an anonymous check and a small piece of paper. "I was wrong, and now I want to be right. Just once." No signature, but Ember recognized the handwriting and gave a slight nod. A late redemption was still better than none at all. No elaborate wedding flowers, no grand choir. Just the early sunlight filtering through the old trees outside the chapel, and the closest loved ones sitting quietly in a simple, warm space. Ember James and Bennett Cross held hands as they exchanged vows. They came together, not through lofty promises, but through the days they spent fighting side by side, for truth, for justice, after the ceremony, for hearts to Bennett announced he would rename the Cross Haven estate to Carrington Cross House, both to honor Ember's ancestors and to affirm that this was not just a residence, but a place where memory and knowledge of the entire community would be preserved. The house opened its doors to welcome people for learning, research, and sharing. From underprivileged children to renowned scholars, everyone was welcomed equally. Their love didn't need to be celebrated, because it was a declaration in itself. Not a love story between a white man and a black woman, but a connection between two people who dared to look beyond prejudice, beyond a history marked by division, to write a new chapter for Oak Ridge together. And from that day on, they were not just husband and wife. They became a living symbol of a love beyond skin color, beyond boundaries, rooted in companionship and unwavering belief. Many years have passed since the day Ember James stepped off the train platform with an old trunk and a heart full of hope, only to be rejected because of the color of her skin. But from that very moment, a town, a community, and an entire generation changed forever. Oak Ridge is no longer just an ordinary name on the map. It is now referenced in educational materials, national conferences on social justice, and forums on cultural inclusion. Right in the center of the town square stands a small, modest, yet sacred bronze plaque, engraved with the words, "This land once belonged to Joseph Carrington, a black man stripped of his property through violence, restored by his granddaughter, Ember James, who turned pain into justice for all." Each week, buses bring students and scholars from across the country to Oak Ridge. They sit silently before the plaque, walk through the community library, and arrive at the Carrington Cross House to hear a story that once seemed impossible. Many are brought to tears, not from tragedy, but from hope. The hope that if even one person dares to stand up, an entire community can awaken. And in the hearts of those young visitors, Ember is no longer just one person. She has become a legend, a symbol of resilience, kindness, and the power to transform an entire system through nothing more than truth and unwavering resolve. The night breeze gently swept across the porch of the house, now renamed Carrington Cross House. Ember sat quietly, a warm cup of tea in her hands, her eyes gazing out at the town of Oak Ridge, bathed in peaceful moonlight. That town had once turned its back on her, once whispered, once sneered, once considered her a mistake that shouldn't exist in a tightly closed white community. And yet now, the streets bore new names. The community library stood where Raymond's store once was, and children were learning about Joseph Carrington in classrooms funded by the very foundation Ember had created. It all began with a rejection, with a cold statement on the train platform. "You didn't say you were black." Bennett stepped onto the porch, quietly sitting beside his wife. They didn't need many words. A simple handhold was enough to remind them both of the journey they had traveled, a journey no one believed could happen, yet one that had truly transformed an entire town. Ember smiled gently, her eyes still fixed on the distance, then said, "Raymond rejected me because he thought I wasn't worthy of being a wife. Little did he know I'd be the one deciding the future of the very town he once controlled." A seat once denied had become the seat that made history.